the Daily Solutions Podcast! All right, we're back.
We are back.
No matter how long they try to keep us down,
They can't. They can't do it. We
will
get back up
rise.
again.
So, our next question is coming in from one of our loyal readers out there, listeners. What do you call them again? Who are you guys? And that is, what is the ideal float room setup? What goes inside of it?
What goes inside? Like objects? What objects are in the float room?
That's all they asked. So I think what object? Obviously, trying to describe full construction over the course of this episode is going to be totally insane.
You
So
gotta start with laying the foundation down.
we're going to take artistic liberty with your question and assume that you meant the objects that are going inside a float tank room.
Okay.
Number one,
as little as possible, right? Like that should be. You really, I mean, everything that's in there is something that's going to get salty and needs to be cleaned continuously.
I was going to say number one, a float tank.
Oh, I see. No, I would say even if you can simplify down to not even having a float tank, I would go for that.
Yeah, it's true though, right? Even for the size of it, you know, it's not necessarily that if you could make these giant float tank rooms, that you should even do that. There's definitely an optimal maximum size, and a lot of that has to do with cleaning, yeah, and just getting salt off of everything that is in your room.
Yeah, and so and also nothing in the room should be anything but like non-porous, waterproof sort of materials. Like you want to expect every single thing that's inside of that room to get wet and covered in salt, and you need to be okay with that.
Yeah, so I guess the basics, non-porous, non-slip for the floor.
Yeah.
Hopefully hide salt well. If you see a lot of float centers that have like sterile white walls or seem a little more boring in that sense, the reason is because white hides salt like crazy. So having white walls is a very attractive thing for a float tank center.
So you usually need like a bench to sit on. That's a very typical thing that goes into a float room.
Yep. Something, especially for, just taking off your shoes, your clothes, things like that. Something to sit on is ideal.
Something for people's jackets and stuff like that, like having a coat, unless you have something like that out in your lobby.
Yep,
Little coat
cubbies, hooks.
Yeah.
Or, I've sometimes seen a whole dressing room setup where, separate from going into a float tank room, people have a place to store their objects.
And you'll put your stuff into like a little locker, and then you'll grab a robe and put on a robe and walk from there to your float room.
But assuming that you're doing everything just within a single room, then, cubbies, hooks, something ideally that will put their belongings far enough away from the shower that it's not just getting soaked when they're showering.
Yep.
Which I guess also goes into that category of other things to not put in the room, like a shower curtain is a great thing to not have in your float center room.
Or shower doors, or basically like anything that is going to be a big thing you need to clean all the time, or has nooks and crannies for mold to develop in, or anything like that is almost never worth it.
Which means that you're probably going to have an open shower, which is why I say that putting their belongings away from the main shower area or somewhere where it won't get splashed or wet is kind of essential.
What about the items that the customer will actually use?
Yeah, so it differs a little bit from float center to float center, but you'll see a lot of really familiar things pop up. So at Float On, we basically have a little basket of single-serve items. And the reason those are important, it'll be single-serve earplugs, for example, single-serve Vaseline packets, individually wrapped Q-tips, makeup packets that are also individually wrapped. And the reason that we have all of those kind of separately sealed, even though it creates some more waste, is just for hygiene, right? There's no telling if you had even just Q-tips sitting in a tiny jar. If someone's fingers touched one of the other Q-tips and another customer put that in their ear and there's some risk of contamination, you just want to avoid that with everything possible. So for the most part, and everywhere we can find it, all of the things that we're putting in these baskets that are kind of accessories to the float experience are single serving.
Pretty much my like must list that I think every float center should have is a set of earplugs, and ideally waterproof earplugs, not just kind of the foam ones that you'd put in if you were going to like a rock concert or something, because those just really easily kind of slip out of your ear. But actually having waterproof earplugs is nice in case people have tubes in their ears or some sort of ear condition or something where they're a bit more sensitive, or if they just find the water getting in their ears to be uncomfortable. Then providing those earplugs to me is definitely something that every float center should have.
Yep. So, waterproof earplugs. We use Max silicone earplugs, which are really standard in the industry. We also really like the orange ones because if someone loses an earplug in the tank or it falls out and goes on the ground and kind of gets squished into a corner somewhere, you can actually see the orange ones and know that something is there, as opposed to trying to spot a clear earplug floating in clear water is not the easiest thing in the world.
We have, like Graham mentioned, packets of petroleum jelly that we put into each room for small cuts. The little bottles that we have of half distilled white vinegar and half water. I don't see these around as much as I see the other things we're listing, but I think they're really nice. Like, this is just so after your float, you can squirt this solution into your ears, and it'll help just dissolve any salt that kind of made its way in there, and it'll prevent you from getting the old kind of salty ear the next day.
Yep, yeah, that comes from an old surfer's trick for just kind of taking the salt out of your ears. I've also seen alcohol used for that too, rather than vinegar.
Yeah.
Distilled alcohol. Which honestly to me has just such a much more pungent smell, even than vinegar, was the main downside of. I tried using that, getting out of a float and putting some of the alcohol solution in my ears, which did clear them out really well. But yeah, it just smelled so strongly.
Mm-hmm.
Even the vinegar does too. That's definitely, you smell a little bit like fish and chips when you use the vinegar solution, get out of a float.
Yeah, I usually recommend people do it in the shower afterwards, and that kind of prevents smelling like you just splashed vinegar all over your face.
Okay, so what didn't we cover?
So a neck pillow and sandals is definitely something that you're gonna want in there. The neck pillow is, some people again are coming in because maybe they were in a car injury or something like that, and their whole body's a little bit more sensitive, and they might need that extra support in there. So having a neck pillow is I think very important for float centers.
Yep, and there's different options out there. For a long time, we used pool noodles for our neck pillows. The Float Ease is something manufactured by another float tank center, by one of the Float House boys up there. That is they make the Halo neck pillow. That's very popular, mainly because, and if you do have whatever neck pillow you have, making sure that it can keep the bather's ears below the water is really important. Just for soundproofing. If your neck pillow is pushing their ears above the water, all of a sudden you have all of the sound contamination that's coming in, and just that water-air barrier does so much for the actual soundproofing of a float tank. You don't want to get rid of it.
We have a robe and sandals in our room as well, and that's because we have a bathroom that's out in the hallway. So if someone needs to go to the bathroom at some point in their float, hopping out and being able to put a robe and sandals on rather than putting their clothes back on is always
just wandering down the hall naked.
Which has happened. Even with the robe and sandals in the room, that happens. But, if there are some float centers out there that have a toilet kind of in each float room, and in those cases, maybe the robe is not entirely necessary.
Yep. What else? What else do we put in the float rooms? Again,
a towel. There's a towel on there
a towel,
people.
yeah. Forgot the towel. We have some things available on request for people too, but let's see. So we have a bench, we have the place to put clothes.
Yeah, we've a few other like niceties that I don't know if these are entirely necessary or unnecessary. These are just things that we like to do, like the Q-tips we mentioned. We have a box of Kleenex hung on the wall. Specifically, we took a Kleenex mounting thing for the wall and flipped it upside down.
So good.
you
so
have to,
important.
Yeah, you have to take the Kleenex out from the bottom of it, and that way people's salty hands when they're reaching above it wouldn't drip salt on top of it.
Might be the most brilliant thing we've ever done as an organization.
We have a dispenser for lotion on the wall in case people want some lotion afterwards.
Which I totally recommend. I'm not like a huge lotion person myself, but after a float, I definitely just feel like treating myself to, some nice lotion that I put on.
I've never used it personally, so
You don't use
I don't use the
it's
lotion.
so luxurious.
No.
Anyway, I highly recommend it. You're missing out.
Trash can. There's a small trash can in our rooms.
Closed lid for a trash can too tends to be really nice. Even though we empty it out every time, it's still just nice not to have that open plastic there or the risk of a scent coming out or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Also white to hide salt.
Yeah, everything needs to be white or marbly white colored. And I think that's pretty much everything that goes in our rooms.
Wall heater?
A wall heater, yeah.
And that's for, if you have a really expensive HVAC unit, you can sometimes control the thermostat in the rooms independently. But for most rooms, you'll need something to just be able to tweak it up or down a few degrees separately from the room right next door to it. And we found that just wall-mounted wall heaters, ceramic wall heaters, so they don't make any noise, are a great way to accomplish that.
In addition to our centralized HVAC system.
Yep, which still runs.
Yeah.
But I guess that's more construction, yeah, for user interaction. That's about it. There is a shower. in there in addition to
Yeah.
the float tank.
Yeah.
And not much else. I think that's pretty much the breadth of it. Again, anything that you can remove from the room is really a big win. So it should be much more about distilling things. We've thought about putting water bottles in the rooms before, which we've seen at other places.
Yeah.
But we have real nice kind of hot tub plastic cups, and people can get their own water. And
So specifically cups not made out of glass, so that if someone drops it in that area where they're barefoot, we don't have to deal with broken glass.
yep, so they can grab water outside and bring it in. For us, that was just available enough that it ended up working out, and we wanted to be a little more sustainable.
Yep. I've seen float centers that go as far as putting a little piece of chocolate into the room for everybody. So there's really like all sorts of things you can do to kind of go above and beyond there.
Yeah, is there anything that people absolutely should not put in their float tank rooms? That's common, or that we,
Oh, okay.
that they might put it. I mean, yeah, like a rhinoceros. Like there are clearly things that they shouldn't put in there. Yeah, I think the shower curtains is one that we stumbled into. Shower doors, both of those were just such a hindrance that we walked full face into.
Yep, definitely. Yeah, almost nothing else then until we start getting into crazy construction world.
Yep. So there you have it. That's what we keep in our rooms. Some other options that the other people do, and hopefully this has been at least minorly useful to you, as all of our episodes aim to be.
That's all we're shooting for here.
Minorly useful, which is my nickname in baseball in college.
Okay. Well, if you guys have questions of your own you want to ask, just hop on to floattanksolutions.com/podcast. We'll see you soon.